What up, Fight World? It's your boy Ego, and I'm back with some more boxing. Now, this is a follow-up video. I made a video talking about what was buzzing, what was going on, and I'm going to get some clarification in this video and elaborate because a lot of people were reaching out to me, leaving comments, and asking me why I felt a certain way. So hopefully I could do my best to explain to you where I'm coming from. That's regarding Keith Thurman and Errol Spence Jr. Now, this is, if you want to hear more about the initial topic, the video's on the channel, so check out that video, and here's a picture on the screen. Now, let's get this clear, and I want to be very clear with this. In boxing, I don't know what type of fans other people are. I can only speak on behalf of me. But me as a fan, I'm not emotional. Like, I like a lot of several fighters. Like, I like Canelo and I like Laura, you know what I mean? Because I like boxing. So I don't really care, you know what I mean? I really, truly like both of them. I've watched all of their recent fights and things of that nature. But for whatever reason, in boxing, you got a lot of fanboys, you got a lot of racially motivated people, and you got different things like that where they're extremists and they're radical fans. Like, if I like this guy, then I have to hate this person. So naturally, some people think if you say something down, like I've made videos about Golovkin that are pro Golovkin, that are great, you know what I mean, giving him all the props in the world. I made a video said I don't think anyone at middleweight can beat Golovkin. I made the duck list video where two people on the list made the list for ducking Golovkin. One was Peter Quillen, one was Sergio Martinez. But people don't bring that up. They say, oh, because I said Triple G, I'm not impressed with his defense. You guys can sugarcoat it and say he has a great defense. I'm not impressed with it. I don't think it's the greatest defense. I mean, it's working for him because of his style. So at the end of the day, he's a good fighter. But people want to throw out, oh, you hate Golovkin. You hate this fighter. So I'm sure this video ultimately is going to be no different. People are going to say, you hate Keith Thurman. And that's not the thing. I really like Keith Thurman, and I really like Earl Spence Jr. However, to give some clarification, and I want to give you guys a little bit more depth to what I was saying, is the problem in boxing that I've noticed is it's like whether people like Mayweather or not, so many people emulate him, period. I don't care what anyone says. It is what it is. I see it. Like, I mean, he started saying hard work, dedication, and then I've heard other people say it. You know what I'm saying? He didn't coin, like, necessarily come up with those words, but we all know who popularized something. It's just like Michael Jackson in the moonwalk. Michael Jackson wasn't the first person to do that type of step. Actually, it was a jazz step, and it was done in the 50s. But we all know the person that popularized it is Michael Jackson, period. You know what I mean? Same thing with Floyd Mayweather. There's little things he did, like the shoulder roll. He's not the first person to do like that Philly shell defense. Obviously, he learned it from his pops. James Toney and others have implored that. But he popularized it. He is probably most known, and he's under the microscope and the spotlight. Now, the bad side about that is, in my opinion, Floyd, for 19 years, has given his all to boxing and paid his dues, and he's earned his stripes. Now, I don't agree with everything he does. Like, you know what I mean, the Maidana glove situation. Just let the man wear whatever gloves. I think Floyd is the better skilled fighter, so I think he would have beat him no matter what gloves Maidana had or whatever. But at least, just so there's no scapegoats, let him wear the gloves. So I don't agree. I'm not a fanboy. I don't just agree with everything. But the fact of the matter is he's paid his dues for 19 years. Now, the bad side is, since he is the highest paid athlete, he's the star of the sport, everybody wants to be a shot caller like him. Whether they like him or challenge him, even guys that are calling him out have emulated bits and pieces of Floyd Mayweather. You know what I mean? Like Kell Brook. There was a situation with the gloves. Didn't want Brandon Rios to wear certain types of gloves. Like, why? I mean, everyone says Rios is limited. I mean, let him wear. He's coming to the UK. Like, he can't just wear whatever gloves he wants. Or you look at this situation with Earl Spence and Keith Thurman. Again, I like Keith Thurman, but the thing is, I always strive to look for consistency. Consistency with what a person is saying. And my problem with what Keith Thurman says is he's saying regarding the Earl Spence Jr., he thinks it's disrespectful that Floyd would even suggest that. Now, for you guys who didn't see my initial video, basically Floyd said Sean Porter or Keith Thurman should fight Errol Spence Jr. on his undercard. Now, as a fighter in his team, those guys can decide if they want to take that offer or not. He even said he'll relinquish a belt and put that up so that the vacant belt, they can battle for the vacant belt, right? And from what I've seen in interviews, Sean Porter and Keith Thurman both sound like they weren't really interested in that. They want to fight Mayweather. But the thing is, Mayweather, again, has paid his dues for 19 years, and nobody can strong arm him, whether you like it or not. Nobody's going to really be able to strong arm him and force him into anything. Like, for years, 5 years, people were asking him direct Pacquiao questions. Will you fight Pacquiao? And he did whatever he wanted to do. He said whatever he wanted to say. So, I mean, if you know anything about Floyd, you'll know you're not going to corner him and pin it. Even when they were talking to him, Dante's Boxing Nation Fight Hype, a lot of people had Mayweather out. He was, I don't know, he's by some bushes or something. And they were asking certain questions. And he was like, man, come on, don't do that. Like, he's not going to answer. He's not going to do... If anything is proven, he's not going to do what you feel he should do or want to do. If he wants to answer, he's going to answer. Whether you like him for it or you hate him for it, that is the fact. And that's the pattern with Floyd Mayweather. He does what he wants. He beats to the sound of his own drum. And that's just all that could be said. So as far as Sean Porter and Keith Thurman, I really feel like they're not in a position of leverage. You know what I mean? To even, you look at a situation like Cotto. Cotto is saying, he said, him being the A side, he even said it. He said, oh, Canelo and Golovkin got to wait his turn in line, and a belt doesn't define me. Just stuff like Mayweather said in the past, a belt doesn't define me. Nobody, you know what I mean, I'll give up the belts. I don't have to do what they tell me to do type of attitude, right? Now, the thing is, it's like everybody is starting to do that. And the thing is, I'm a consistent person. Miguel Cotto and Mayweather, despite if I like each and everything that they've said or done, the fact is they're on the end of their career, the tail end of their career, and they've accomplished. Pacquiao, Cotto, and Mayweather have longevity in sport. Marquez, you can throw him in there too. They have longevity in the sport, and the fact is they've accomplished more than these young cats who are age 20 to 25. You know what I mean? Go look at Pacquiao's career when he was 20 to 27, or look at Mayweather's career around there and see the names that these guys were fighting. You know what I mean? They were fighting the top-ranked people per their division. Same with Cotto. You know what I mean? Cotto was fighting the tough fights. Randall Bailey had power. Paulie Malignaggi was ranked. He was fighting the guys, Torres and stuff like that. Zab Judah later, Mosley. You know what I mean? So, bottom line is, not everybody can emulate what some of these A-side fighters do because they haven't built their legacy to the same thing. And I'm not saying anyone should get special treatment per se. However, this is the way of the world. You know what I mean? I'm not here to sugarcoat. It's the way of the world. If I worked at a job for 20 years, maybe some things that I did would go under the radar as opposed to someone who hasn't completed their 90-day probation period. That's a fact. You know what I mean? If I come 5 minutes late, late is late. But do you think if I've been with the company for 20 years, they're going to hold me necessarily to the same standard as somebody who hasn't completed their probation period and is a new hire? You know what I'm saying? No, they'll probably shun the person who's late, 20 minutes late, that has only been working there for 30 days because you haven't even proven anything. You haven't even got all your full access. You're still in probationary period. You know what I'm saying? So at the end of the day, it is what it is. And if you have seniority, that's kind of one of the perks. You work for a company for 20 years, 10 years, you have a couple other perks that maybe a new hire won't have. Higher pay, more benefit time. They might be a little bit more lenient on granting you because you've earned your keep. You've paid your dues. So if you want to request a vacation for 2 weeks, they might be more inclined to give it to you because there's 10 to 20 years of service with that company and seniority, as opposed to a person, let's say, I just started a company, I've worked there for a month and a half, and then I want to request 2 weeks off so I can go to Cancun. You know what I mean? They might not do it versus a guy who's been working there 15 years. They might grant him that. I mean, this is the way of the world. I'm not reinventing the wheel here. So my thing with Keith Thurman and the Earl Spence Jr. is I like Keith Thurman. I like Earl Spence Jr. And that seems like a good fight. And to me, I feel like Keith Thurman is kind of, his demeanor is kind of like he's a shot caller. Like, why should I fight? Why should I stoop down to Earl Spence Jr. level? You know what I mean? And I don't feel like that's a major backtrack, because you're talking about an Olympian. Now, the thing I will give Keith Thurman is that Olympian isn't proven at a world class level, right? You know what I'm saying? Like, he hasn't fought none of the names that would catapult him to superstardom. So I give Keith Thurman that. I understand that. But this is a guy who's undefeated. He's looking exceptionally sharp. And, you know what I mean? He's taking bodies, man down. And he's looking real good. And he has a amateur background, right? And he's looking like the force. So for Keith Thurman, let's say he were to stop Errol Spence Jr., I would give him a lot of credit. Even if he won a decision, I would give him a lot of credit. You know what I mean? To the point where even though Earl Spence is not as proven, I would probably give him more credit than beating Guerrero, because at the very least, Guerrero has jumped up 2 weight classes. He fought Selçuk Aydin, and that was a very tough fight. I don't know if you guys remember that fight or even seen it, but he started to fade to me a bit at the end, but he still won. So props to, you know what I mean, being off a long layoff, dealing with their wife's cancer, coming back and taking the gamble. But, I mean, he started to fade in that fight. Same thing with Berto. He was looking good in that early half, mugging Berto, but then Berto showed heart and tenacity and started swelling Robert Guerrero's eye towards the end of that fight. You know what I mean? It started coming back a little bit. Then he fought Mayweather, and Mayweather pieced him up. He won maybe 2-3 rounds. And he fought Kamagai. I thought that was a more difficult fight than it needed to be. Put Kell Brook in there with Kamagai and see what happens. You know what I mean? Put Keith Thurman in there with Kamagai, see what happens. Because those guys are stronger. So it probably wouldn't have been a back and forth fight of the year candidate, which it was. I think Guerrero was in a fight of the year candidate that shouldn't have been a fight of the year candidate based on who Guerrero was and who Kamagai was. He actually made, it did more for Kamagai's stock. You know what I mean? And then you fought Keith Thurman. So I'm not trying to take away from Keith Thurman, because I thought he looked good. He looked damn good versus Robert Guerrero. But in the grand scheme of things, what great, extraordinary from the opening bell to the final round performance has Robert Guerrero really had at welterweight? You know what I'm saying? Like, what performance? And even the Mayweather fight, he at least earned it because he was a mandatory. So, you know what I mean? That was a fight that Mayweather either had to fight him or, and then this was Mayweather's first fight out of jail. So, yeah, his first Showtime fight, everything, the cards worked. It made sense. First fight out of jail, so it was a little bit longer layoff than he was used to. Guerrero was calling him out, talking reckless in interviews. He was a mandatory, so he's like, yeah, well, why don't we take this for the first fight in the Showtime deal? I have no problem with that. But, you know what I mean, by the time we got around to Keith Thurman, you look at his welterweight fights, what did he really do? So to me, I would give Keith Thurman more credit if he were to be the first to defeat. If you take an undefeated fighter with momentum, if you take their O, you know what I mean, to me, that's a credit to you and your skill level. And if anything, one thing I've realized recently is having amateurs and pros, they're 2 different ball games. However, having that amateur background is very significant. And you look at the guys who have longevity in the sport, or, you know what I mean, very successful, a lot of them have some type of amateur background. And I'm seeing guys like Lomachenko, Felix Verdejo, guys like Rigondeaux. You know what I mean? Look at Lomachenko and Rigondeaux. They're doing what normal fighters, other fighters, it takes, like Canelo. Canelo has just almost as much fights as Mayweather, but if you look at a lot of those early names, you won't recognize a damn name on there. But he has about as many fights because Canelo turned pro at age 15, so he was learning on the job. He didn't have like the amateur background. He had to basically take a bunch of fights in Mexico, and then he started fighting elsewhere and learn on the job. Versus a Rigondeaux, he's able to defeat Donaire, and he barely has double-digit fights. He had like 10 or 11 fights or whatever it was when he beat Donaire, you know what I mean, and then beat Joseph Ekbeko. Guys like Lomachenko. This dude fought Salido and didn't get trashed. And Salido was coming off, I think, the Cruz TKO or whatever. And it's because they have amateur background. Same thing with Earl Spence Jr. He has an Olympic background. So I understand he hasn't done as much as a pro, but obviously he has a pro style, and his amateur background has helped him acclimate. It's not like he's just Seth Mitchell, you know what I mean? Like a guy who came from playing football and didn't even want to box but got into boxing late and stuff like that. This is a guy with Olympic pedigree, you know what I mean? So to me, that's one issue with it. Keith Thurman is making it sound like it's a downgrade when in fact I would give him more credit for beating Errol Spence Jr. than a lot of other Julio Diaz. Julio Diaz is a blown up lightweight who lost to Sean Porter, had a draw with Sean Porter, got knocked out by Kendall Holt. He gave Amir Khan issue, but he still lost that fight. You know what I'm saying? And then Keith Thurman fought him after. You know what I'm saying? So I'll give you more credit. So it's just like that's too selective. Even his upcoming fight, you're fighting Luis Collazo, who got banged up by Amir Khan and knocked down maybe 3 times, I think it was off the top of my head. Luis Collazo, I thought there was some controversy in it, but he still lost to Hatton, still lost to Berto. And the best thing I guess he's done in recent memory is to defeat Victor Ortiz, who's a loose cannon, who's coming off of a long layoff and a broken jaw injury, and he stopped him. You know what I mean? And that's really what he's done in recent memory. So I'm not saying it's a horrible fight. Stylistically, maybe Collazo, since he's never been stopped, maybe he can give Keith Thurman some issue, but that's the other portion of my problem. You can't downgrade Earl Spence Jr. and then you're fighting Collazo. Like, see, that right there doesn't make sense to me. You can't. It's just like when Amir Khan was saying, I only want the big fights. From now on, I only want the big fights. I only want Marquez, Cotto, Mayweather, Pacquiao. I don't want Kell Brook. Okay, if I'm to believe that, that's fine. But again, I always look for consistency. And to me, the message, it gets a little bit faded, and now it starts to get into that gray area when you say that I only want the big fights, and then you fight Chris Algieri off of a loss, and he's moving up in weight. That's not a big fight. That's not a fight anyone requested. Most people didn't even give Chris Algieri a shot, even though it turned out to be a close fight. So I say the same thing for Keith Thurman. You can't downgrade Earl Spence Jr., who at the very least has looked sharp and looked good, never been stopped. He has power, he's accurate, and he has an Olympic background, undefeated guy, but you're fighting Luis Collazo. So I just don't really understand and agree with him in that, and saying it's disrespectful to even mention him. And the other thing is, people always base their careers or their struggles and trials and tribulations on the next man. Earl Spence Jr. has nothing to do with Keith Thurman being ducked by the people, because I do think people avoided Keith Thurman too. You know what I mean? Maidana, I don't think Paulie Malignaggi wanted to fight him, but that doesn't really have nothing to do with Earl Spence Jr. So it's just like a lot of people have this mentality like, oh, because I had to struggle to get the big names to even step up in the ring with me, now everyone else got to struggle. And I don't think that's how boxing should really be. Like, oh, because I went through it, you got to go through it. I mean, if it's the best fight and the best, it is what it is. You know what I mean? You can't base your career, because truth be told, Canelo had a lot of limelight before he had really faced an Austin Trout undefeated guy or a Mayweather. So you can't really base your career off of what another person's doing. Then you got people like Terrence Crawford, who seem to have a high ring IQ and skill set, and he might not get as much fame or the glamour and glitz as Canelo. Or look at Lomachenko. He's not getting as much of a buzz. Like, yeah, the hardcore fans respect him, but Canelo probably has more buzz than all of these guys, than Crawford, Rigondeaux, Lomachenko, and stuff like that. So, I mean, at the end of the day, you can't base your boxing career and your next move on another person, or, you know what I mean, because you had to struggle to get big name fights. Now everybody got to struggle and no one can fight you. And I think that's kind of what's wrong with boxing. Everybody wants to be the A side, and everyone's starting to talk like they're the A side. And ultimately, like I said, Pacquiao, Cotto, Mayweather, these guys are all proven. Whether we like them and call them a diva and stuff like that, the very least, they're certified. You can look at Pacquiao's numbers. He did like 900,000 versus Bradley in the first fight. He has like over 1 million buys with De La Hoya and Hatton and Cotto's and stuff like that. Same thing with Mayweather. He holds the record for the top 3 grossing pay-per-views or whatever it is, and he's making 300 mil a year. Same thing with Cotto. He's done that. He's sold out the Garden, and you know what I'm saying. He did good ratings versus Delvin Rodriguez. In a lack for a better word, Delvin Rodriguez ain't shit. You know what I'm saying. He's considered a bum even at that point. And he did record breaking. You know what I mean. Did good numbers fighting Delvin Rodriguez. So it's just a testament to Cotto's star power. So whether you like it or not, these guys are all proven. So these young guys, 20 something, to me, the only person in their 20s that might be able to get away with acting a bit of an A-side, whether we like it or not, is Broner and Canelo. And Broner's his is for a different reason, because it's kind of how he acts, like an asshole. He still gets people watching. And then Canelo is just because Canelo's kind of a rock star, and a lot of, you know what I mean, girls like him. He's very popular. But other than that, nobody else is at that level. You got Mayweather, Pacquiao, Cotto, who are certified and they are credible A-sides. Then you got a guy like Canelo and Broner just beneath that. And then everybody else is underneath that. You know what I mean? Keith Thurman, when's the last time he's been on pay-per-view? When's the last time he's even been on a pay-per-view co-main event? You know what I mean? Brandon Rios has even been on a main event pay-per-view. I don't think Keith Thurman has. I don't think he's even been a co-main event like Danny Garcia versus Lucas Matisse on the Mayweather-Canelo undercard. I don't even, to my knowledge, I don't remember a time that Keith Thurman has even been a co-main event or a main event on a pay-per-view. Definitely not a main event, but I don't even remember the time he's been a co-main event. And that's my thing. So as much as I like Keith Thurman, I think the Earl Spence Jr. is not a bad fight. It's a risky fight for both of them, though. You know what I mean? Earl Spence said he's ready to take the fight, and obviously he has a less of a name than I would say Keith Thurman, but it's a good fight. And ultimately, it's just, we got a lot of people in the world of boxing, in my opinion, who are just all acting like the A side. Amir Khan says he's the A side. That's why all these people aren't fighting. Amir Khan should fight Keith Thurman. That's a great fight. I love that fight. And that's the thing with me. I don't care. But it's just so many people are trying to act like they're the shot caller and they're in a privileged position. And really, you're not. Like, I mean, Keith Thurman, I've always backed him up and defended him. But there's a lot of people on my channel, and you can't argue with it, is they say he hasn't fought that big name. You know what I mean? Gennady Golovkin ain't even fought that big name. That I'm talking about, that De La Hoya type of name, with a guy with momentum, a guy who's undefeated, a guy that's going to make you see after his performance and be like, wow, Keith Thurman really is something, a star is born. He hasn't had that. Leonard Bundu, that ain't it. You know what I mean? Julio Diaz, that ain't it. Even Guerrero. Guerrero had, you know what I'm saying? What did he do at welterweight? Got beat by Mayweather. Tough fights with everybody else. With Aiden, Berto, and Kama guy. You know what I'm saying? So that's the thing. And that's the clarification. I know the video is a little bit long, but that's my thing. I just want to see the best fight the best. And I don't think it's out of the question to want to see, especially if it's for a title, a respected title. Even if it's a vacant title. Why not fight Keith Thurman and Errol Spence? I would watch it. I would pay for it. And it's exposure being on a Mayweather undercard. So I get it. Not everyone wants to be like Canelo pulled himself off the Mayweather undercard. But arguably, like I said, Canelo's just underneath them. He's doing crazy numbers. I think Canelo had the best numbers since like 2006 in his fight with Kirkland. He did great ratings. You know what I mean? Keith Thurman, a great fighter, but from a business perspective, that's the thing. I don't even care about business and talking business, but if the fighters want to talk business, then we can look at the business and see what's what. You know what I'm saying? So in a perfect world, none of this stuff would matter, and we would just see the best fight the best. But we know at the end of the day, to be realistic, business plays a part in these decisions, especially when the fighters are bringing it up. So if you're bringing it up, then I'm going to bring it up. You know what I mean? And the thing is, like I said, Canelo's a rock star. He's doing phenomenal numbers. Keith Thurman and a lot of other guys, not just him, they're not doing those types of numbers that they could say, you know what, I'm an A side. I could do whatever I want. I could, you know what I mean? That, like, you notice how Canelo's calling shots saying, hey, we fight at this catch weight. He's calling those shots. The only fight that he didn't dictate anything was in the Mayweather fight, and that's because he sought out Mayweather, and Mayweather was more of the A side. So that's the thing about boxing. If we want to talk business, let's talk business. Keith Thurman versus Spence is a good fight, and in my opinion, it makes less sense when you say, oh, who's Spence? And like, that's disrespectful, but you're fighting Collazo. You know what I'm saying? What win, if you really analyze that, if it's really truthfully disrespectful to you, in your mind, what win gets you more recognition from the fan? Beating Collazo, a guy who lost to Hatton, Berto, Amir Khan recently, you know what I mean, last year or whatever it was, to Amir Khan, got knocked down 3 times and almost got shut out. Maybe he won 1 or 2 rounds or something like that, right? And that was Amir Khan's first fight at welterweight, not to mention. That beating Collazo, and he's really been inactive and hasn't really done anything since that time. Or beating a hot young prospect, and you could say I was the first person to officially beat this guy that y'all were saying is the future. You know what I mean? To me, there's more risk, but there's also more to be gained by beating a Errol Spence Jr. So if Keith Thurman, and that's the thing, if Keith Thurman can't get Amir Khan, he can't get Kell Brook, he can't get Mayweather, just like I say to Golovkin, if you can't get Cotto, you can't get Canelo, you can't get Mayweather, you can't get Froch, then maybe you should move up to 168. You don't have to, but if you can't get Quillen and all these other dudes, maybe you should. So that's what I'm asking of these fighters, is you got to really look at your career and analyze it. If you're not getting those A-side fights that you want, like Keith Thurman, I know he would love to fight Amir Khan. He's been on record, he called him out, all kinds of stuff. But if you're not getting that, you can't stall out your career and turn down offers that would at least get you more attention. And to me, again, nobody's going to change my opinion on this. Beating Earl Spence Jr., who is perceived as the future, even though he hasn't beat an A-level or B-level person, he's perceived, and perception is reality. Beating him stands for more than beating Collazo at this particular point. It's just that simple. Like, there's no other way to put it. You will get more dues and more credit by beating a guy like that. You know what I mean? Say, hey, I stopped this dude dead in his track and made him regroup. Now he has 1 loss and he has to go back to the drawing board and take softer touches because he called me out and he wasn't ready for it. As opposed to beating Collazo, guys who's already been beat. Let me know what you guys think. Make sure you like my video. As always, hate, comment, and subscribe. Till next video, it's Ego signing off.